Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. We have a webinar today. We'll be talking about our certification and compliance with Ubuntu. So specifically, we'll cover the FIPS 140-2 and the CIS hardening. And with me today, I have Sean and Vinita. We'll do introductions just in a second. But first, let's have a quick look at the agenda. So first, we'll tell you briefly about what we're doing here at Canonical, and then we'll deep dive into the FIPS 140-2 certification and compliance. We'll touch on, what is FIPS, who's using it, why they're using it, and then we'll look at the validation process for pieces of Ubuntu that are getting FIPS certified, and we'll tell you a bit more about our Ubuntu FIPS offering. Then we'll jump into Ubuntu hardening and talk about, why and how to harden the Ubuntu, and we'll use the CIS benchmark as an example of getting your Ubuntu hardened. And last but not least, we'll talk about our offer on the cloud, which is called Ubuntu Pro, and Sean will cover that in more details. So my name is Lek. I'm a product manager here at Canonical, focused on the security aspects, based in London. And with me today, I have a pleasure to have two really great experts in the field. Vinita, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Vinita Kamath. I manage the security certifications group within the Ubuntu security team. I've been in the security certifications and compliance space for nearly 7 years now, and 4 of those years have been with Canonical. So my team does various security certifications like FIPS, common criteria. We do CIS benchmarks. We also work on STIG with DSIS. And as Sean mentioned, we'll particularly be diving into FIPS and CIS more in this webinar. Thank you.
And I'm Sean Murphy, one of the product managers here on the public cloud side. I have an extensive Department of Defense background prior to joining to Canonical. Very excited to be here. Thank you, Lek.
Great. Let's dive straight in. So to those of our viewers who don't know much about FIPS, what can we tell about FIPS and why is it useful for the organizations? So some of the information are here on the slide already, but maybe Vinita, you can walk us through the requirements.
Sure. So FIPS is nothing but a series of federal information standards. It deals with basically having a secure cryptographic implementation for all your libraries and modules, so to speak. So FIPS, it's issued by National Institute of Standards and Technology, which is a NIST, is primarily the body that issues the FIPS certificates for your module. And it's important because a lot of federal agencies mandate FIPS because it deals with a lot of sensitive data. All these government agencies like DoD, NSA, and various other government agencies of Canada. And basically, it deals with stronger encryption requirements. The data that is in flight and data at rest needs to be encrypted with stronger cryptography and hashes and everything. So it deals with the various specification standards dealing with all of these crypto requirements. And why do we use FIPS? It is a mandatory requirement for federal agencies. And there's also agencies like U.S. voting system, that's not mentioned over here, and various U.S. states also require it, though all the states don't mandate it, but they are increasingly requiring FIPS compliance. In addition to the federal agencies, a lot of private sectors like finance, legal, all these services, all these industries that handle sensitive data also require FIPS. In addition, we also see a lot of customers who are looking for FedRAMP compliance, which is a compliance required by cloud service providers. They specifically require FIPS certified modules to be used in a cloud deployment. There are also different common criteria certification schemes that require FIPS, especially as you go into a higher protection profile based scheme where FIPS is a requirement within that common criteria protection profile to get the certification.
And Sean, you mentioned your experience in DoD space. I would guess that not only the DoD units or part of DoD organizations, but also their vendors and suppliers would need to be FIPS certified in order to be providing services for those units.
Absolutely, I would have loved to have something like this 5-10 years ago. This would have saved so much time. So having an amazing partner like Canonical who absolutely understands security, understands open source, and is just an expert in this field, producing something like this or taking this down off of my list, this is amazing.
Well, if we don't have anything to add here, let's jump into the validation process. Vinita, could you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, so FIPS validation is a pretty involved process. It takes several months to more than a year or to get a module certified. So as is depicted in the blocks here, I would describe two major entities that are involved in a validation process from the government side. One is ACVP, which is actually indicated by modules test report here, which is basically automated cryptographic validation program. And then there is NIST, a CSC, which is essentially is CMVP, which is cryptographic module validation program. Those are the two bodies that we would have to interface with. So Canonical, as a cryptographic module vendor, when we decide to validate a module, what we need is basically we get the services of accredited lab. We work with, Canonical works with AdSec Information Security. We contract with them. Basically, they consult with us on what the specification changes are, where the gaps are, identifying the gaps in our cryptographic implementations, and etc. So our developers go through extensive patching process and also writing code to meet the requirements. Then we ship the module to the lab reviews it, then the lab tests it, and testing is also pretty involved because each of the cryptographic implementation could have several optimizations. Like you have assembly, could have a C implementation, you could have a different implementation. Every particular implementation has to be tested. So the lab tests these different implementations through the ACVP, which is indicated as the modules test report. It generates a test report, and then we get test certificates. And the lab then creates a security policy, which essentially is a document that specifies in what environment the module must be operated on, what are the requirements, and what ciphers or what modes are required, basically allowed in FIPS mode, what does the module support, and all of those are detailed in the security policy document. And this module, along with the security policy document, goes to NIST, which is your CMVP, Cryptographic Module Validation Program. It is a joint venture between the US government and CSEC, which is the Communication Security Establishments in Canada. So it's a joint venture between two governments. NIST basically does a thorough evaluation of the module. It may take up to several months at NIST, where the reviewers are assigned and they review, and there is a back and forth between the lab and the NIST, and sometimes changes may be required. And at the end of this rigorous process, a FIPS certificate is issued. And this certificate is essentially valid and to be used in US as well as in agencies in Canada. So that's pretty much a summary of how we get a FIPS module FIPS certified.
I've heard that this could be a very long process, so you need to start early on to get all the Ubuntu LTS versions FIPS compliant and get them through the door and have this offering available. And this is also why our 2004 LTS, so the latest Ubuntu that was released earlier this year in April, is still not FIPS certified, but this certification is pending, and it will be coming up when ready. So just to give you some idea of our roadmap. Go ahead, Vinita.
Yes. So Ubuntu actually started FIPS certifying from 1604, which is a Xenial. It's a long-term release. And we started with certifying the major cryptographic modules like kernel crypto API, OpenSSL, and then OpenSSH client and server, and VPN service like StrongSwan. And by the time Ubuntu 1804 came around, we did all of those 1604 modules. We also added custom optimized kernels for public clouds for both AWS and Azure on 1804. We see increasingly clouds wanting to deploy FIPS certified kernels. So that was an addition on 1804. On 1804, we also had customers ask us about a certified disk encryption, full disk encryption. And we also added libgcrypt to our list of certified modules, but it's still pending with NIST. So once it comes out, we would have a certified disk encryption for 1804. And one of the changes that we made, we decided we should have modules. We work on the modules immediately right when the LTS release comes about, because we figured, from the experience going through 1604 and 1804 certifications, the amount of work involved and the planning that goes into it, and how to optimize testing, we figured our way. And for 2004, we decided to have all of the modules submitted to NIST within 6 months of LTS release, and we are on par to get that submitted to NIST for 2004. So all the modules that are there in 1604 and 1804 will also be certified for 2004.
Amazing. I know that also, once a component or one of these modules becomes certified, it shouldn't be changed and further modified. But it means that we cannot apply security patching if we want to remain this module to be fully FIPS compliant. But I know that we have a workaround for it. Could you tell us a bit more about that, Vinita?
Sure. So unfortunately, what you stated is accurate, that FIPS certification is tied to the binary that we certified, which essentially is not a good scheme for software certification because software inherently changes. We have to patch. So this is something in discussion with NIST as well. We haven't seen anything change as yet. But what Canonical provides its customers are access to the certified modules. There are customers who actually want a FIPS compliant base, but they also want to be on top of CVE fixes and bug fixes. So we also have mechanism, a separate archive where we where we constantly patch our modules, both kernel and all the modules, and with CVE fixes. So it caters to the demands of different types of customers we have. So if they are looking to be on top of code that is baseline FIPS compliant with some CVE fixes on top, they have that available through Canonical. And what we also do is we don't keep that certification static, in the sense once in several months, we aim to be at 6 months cadence, but as soon as we get a module back from NIST, we recertify our modules with all the CVE fixes. And then we have a more updated module that is certified, that is available to our customers who really require certified modules. So those are the initiatives that we have taken to keep our customers meet their needs.
Thank you, Vinita. I think we'll conclude on the FIPS piece right now. I hope that our viewers will have some questions, and there will be a Q&A session afterwards, so we can follow up and answer to some questions that our viewers might have. Let's now jump into the CIS benchmark, the CIS hardening for Ubuntu. I think that unlike FIPS, which makes sense only to a specific set of customers, CIS benchmark is much wider offering that helps to make Ubuntu more secure and prevent all the cyber attacks and malware that might be affecting the system. Can you tell us a bit more about what the CIS benchmark is?
Yes. So CIS benchmark is basically consensus-based benchmark that is developed with community support. Basically, it's a very popular benchmark that is used to run clouds and to actually counter cybersecurity attacks and threats. It deals with basically reducing the surface area of an attack by access control means, by means of removing the applications and services that are inherently insecure or badly configured and things like that. So CIS has published benchmarks for Ubuntu since quite a few releases, since 12.04. But Canonical has been actively working with CIS since 16.04 to streamline the recommendations, based on Ubuntu requirements and working with the community. So essentially, we work with the CIS. We create a draft, and the draft is opened up to the community for a wider review. So that's entire public basically, and then they provide recommendations, modifications, and those modifications go into the benchmark, at the end of which it is published. And the benchmark is basically nothing but a configuration guide, which contains a bunch of checklists and rules. And these rules contain, how to audit a system and how to remediate a system if the audit comes back as non-compliant.
Yeah.
So that's
I opened one of our benchmarks actually, like for 1804, I think, and it was like 800 pages. So it's a really big piece of information that you can get from the benchmark itself. Maybe we can jump into these two levels of CIS benchmark, which are described in the document. Can you tell us more about level 1 and level 2?
Yes, so the benchmark itself is organized into 2 levels and 4 different profiles, if you will. And the profiles basically are for server and workstation, and each of them have a level 1 and level 2 classification within the profile. So level 1 is a most common sense, I would say, set of rules that can be applied. They're very practical. It deals with quickly reducing the attack surface. I would say the class of rules that go into level 1 could be removing telnet or some of the services and applications that you don't need, and setting permissions to some of those password files, shadow files, things like that. So where we get a quick security benefit but it does not negatively inhibit the performance of a system because it's just removing services and applications and setting permissions on the files. Most of it. Most of the customers are happy by using a level 1 security setting for benchmark. Now, there may be needs where you would want to go deeper with the security requirement, and your security is paramount for your organization. In which case, you could turn on your level 2 setting, and level 2 could mean you're heavily auditing your system against who is accessing what in privileged access and all that. Along with the auditing, you may be required to partition your disk a certain way, create separate partitioning for temp and different directories where you allow a different set of users to access, things like that. So level 2 could provide more security, so to speak, but it could have an impact on the performance of a system since it's quite a bit of auditing that goes on. Those are the two different levels offered by CIS.
Okay, thank you. We can jump into what is being offered with Ubuntu. As you said, we are working with the CIS to produce the benchmark from early on, 1604. And now we have the benchmark ready for 1604, 1804, and 2004, although 2004 doesn't yet have the tooling that we produce. I applied the tooling, and I've seen how much easier it is than going through the document itself. As I mentioned, a few hundred pages, probably like 800 pages document. It will be an almost impossible job to apply it one by one. Could you tell us a bit more about the tooling that you developed?
Yes. So both 1604 and 1804, it's quite manual and tedious process to go through the benchmark and start auditing each rule and remediate each rule there. So we have developed a tool which automates all of this auditing and hardening. The auditing is a SCAP based. Basically, the rules are specified as XML and in OVAL format, and we have a library which is a libopenSCAP, which is a SCAP-based library that does the audit scan, that reads through this XML files, and it runs the scan. You can specify what level you want to audit your system. Is it a level 1 server or level 2 server or a workstation? So the tool basically takes that as an input, runs the scan, and at the end of it, it generates a report. You could specify a text report or an HTML report, and the report basically contains what you're compliant with and where your gaps are and how to, where you want to fix it. We also go and automated the hardening, which basically fixes all the issues on a freshly installed Ubuntu. We do not recommend running hardening right now on a production system, but we would rather have that hardening run on a vanilla install of an Ubuntu before it's being used for production, because a lot of configuration files could get changed. We could harden the system against level 1 or a level 2 again, and we could show it to you how hardening a system against level 1 and level 2 and then running the audit tool shows how it mitigates the failures and how it helps meet the compliance.
Okay, thank you, Vinita. Let's now jump straight into the CIS hardening demo and see how it works in reality.
Ubuntu Pro comes with pre-enabled CIS PPAs. So you just need to start installing the CIS package. So basically, what Canonical has done is we packaged the CIS SCAP content in a package. This is SCAP content that does the audit scanning. So the SCAP content consists of basically OVAL and XCDF file, and it's an OpenSCAP-based content. Ubuntu uses something called OSCAP, and that is shipped with a package called libopenSCAP 8. OpenSCAP also allows us to do extensions, which are basically script check engines, where when a certain configuration checks that are difficult to do via SCAP, we do it using bash scripts. Those are also plugged into our packages. The first thing that I would do is install our CIS benchmark package. This is a newly installed Ubuntu server instance. It's a server virtual VM. Once you install the package, you have the SCAP content available on user share security guides. And in here, you see the OVAL XCDF files, which are used in the OpenSCAP tool. You also see a few scripts here, and we also have hardening tool that is shipped with this package, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. To launch a scan, we use OSCAP with a bunch of parameters where you specify which is the XCCDF file, the path to your XCCDF file, what dictionary files you use, which is basically the schema that you use for your OVAL, and if you need any reports to be generated and things like that. So for a simple scan, the CIS benchmark has different profiles. It has a level 1 server and level 2 workstation. For a simple CIS scan, we ship a utility with this package, which is called CIS audit. So if you just run CIS audit with a super user privilege, it launches a level 1 server scan, and you can see it runs all the rules that are applicable to a level 1 server, and it just takes under a minute to finish that. So it generates an HTML report. I have just caught that on my machine, and you can see how that looks. This is basically the report before you do any sort of hardening. So freshly install Ubuntu server machine instance, and you have, for a level 1 server, 65 rules that did not satisfy the condition. It actually tells you which rules fail in this HTML report, and this is essentially the report that's generated. Now what I do, I'm going to go back and harden this machine against the standard. So I go back to where it is installed, and you can see there's a CIS. What we do is the CIS hardening is implemented by a bunch of scripts, and we also ship a configuration file which allows the user to customize some of the configurations that are required for some rules. For example, you decide who is a user on your machine. You actually, for your SSH configuration, you specify the users, groups. You can specify which is your NTP server here. And the first parameter here, so the explanation to all of this customizations, parameters, everything is provided in a README that is shipped with the package that explains which rules are automated, which there are a couple of rules which may need manual configuration. For example, setting a root password, that would be, and doing some, for a level 2 scan or level 2 automation, you actually need partitioning, certain type of partitioning to be implemented. CIS recommends that. All of those would have to be done manually. For example, network firewall configurations, we do not automate those, but I would say, up to 80, a little over 80% of rules are automated. For a bootloader password to be set, you could provide a hash of that password over here, and you can set the user for the bootloader. I'm actually adding myself as a user of the sudo group, and so you do these customizations and some of the configuration settings that are required. And over here, you can see actually there are some default values, that is configuration plugins. For example, the NTPs, it actually gives a pool.ntp.org, and it also uses some of the default values for the audit log max storage. So if defaults are not provided, some of those rules will be skipped by the hardening script. For example, the SSH configuration, those rules will be skipped, and it expects values for the sudo member and some of those other parameters that I just went through. After this, you just launch that main hardening script. Again, the hardening script can also be run against different levels in the benchmark: level 1 server, level 2 server, level 1 workstation, and level 2 workstation. So I'm just running, now we just ran a level 1 scan. Let's do a level 1 hardening, and we can see how this works. So it's running rules by section in the benchmark. Takes about a minute to finish the level 1 hardening, but lower. You can actually run this hardening script multiple times. What we do recommend that this be run on a freshly installed system and not on a production system, just because it alters all the configuration files that are on the machine that may actually have unintended consequences if you're running on a production machine. So what we recommend is in a fresh installed machine, harden the machine via the scripts and then run your scan. You can run the scan multiple times to see if anything has deviated from the benchmark. Okay, so it generates a log, so you can see what rules are skipped, and an entire log, what it dumps on the screen. You can actually see everything in a log as well. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to run the CIS scan again to see what this hardening did. Did it improve anything? I'm going to run this again. Okay, so you can see that the audit scan generates an HTML report here. I have copied it to my machine. This one over here, this is the scan after the hardening, and you can see that from 64 we are down to 5 rules that didn't pass. So the first one, it was 65. These 5 rules are mostly that need manual configuration. For example, the setting the bootloader password, which I didn't do. I could have set the hash in the config file. And this is setting the root password. And some of the firewall rules, we ask for a manual configuration. We do not automate that. And I also did not set those allow and deny users SSH config file in the root parameter config file. So once you set those two and do the manual configuration of those rules, you can expect level 1 server compliant Ubuntu. This is pretty easy and simple. Just under a couple of minutes, you have a hardened CIS system with the Ubuntu Pro image that comes with the CIS PPAs enabled.
All right, that was really exciting. I think it shows how easy it is to harden the system and to audit the system afterwards to benefit from all the tooling that has been prepared for Ubuntu CIS. Let's now see how FIPS and CIS can be applied on the public cloud. Actually, it's the offer that we currently have available for our customers on many public clouds. I'll let Sean present our offering there. Sean?
Thanks, Leif. And really the most exciting news for me is that it's available right now. We're not talking about something maybe it's going to happen. No, it's available right now. You go into AWS, Azure, you search for FIPS, and boom, there you go. Ubuntu FIPS, ready to launch, ready for your scripts, ready to keep all your data secure. Very exciting. And so, kind of go to the next slide, looking at what Ubuntu Pro FIPS, these images available on Azure and AWS. These are commercial images. They are professional images. So there's a lot of stuff that we throw in as well. So Ubuntu Pro, just generically, let's talk a little bit about that. That has a bundle of amazing features, services, benefits that we can dive into. But also, Canonical's amazing support. We've got that backend support available, and also via private offer. And we talked a little bit about Ubuntu 16.04, and some of our keen listeners are going to say, well, hey, that's going to end soon. Well, no, one of our professional offering benefits is that we actually have a longer end of life. And so for 16.04, we're looking at April of 2024 instead of your expected 2021. Same with 18.04, a much more extended release, 10 years after the original release. And as we said in previous slides, 20.04 at FIPS is currently in the works. And so that also will have an extended support as well. We have this concept of this ESM, the extended security maintenance. And really what this is looking at not just the kernel, not just the install experience, but everything that you use, the open source ecosystem that you depend on as developers, as infrastructures as DevOps, and pretty much giving you this full coverage as long as you install it from our package management system for any high critical CVEs for 28,000 components. This is again something in my prior experience. I would have loved to have something like this for 10 years. It's unimaginably cool. And then those FIPS modules configured, ready to use by default, as Vinitha was saying, and the security patches for that. That's very exciting. And go to the next slide, just taking a look at, some logos of what's possible here. So it's not just, a FIPS kernel that we're talking about here. This is your database engines. This is your web servers, your app servers, your messaging servers. This is something that, Canonical really does well. We know security. This is what we know. This is what we do. And this is what you get with this professional commercial offering with Ubuntu Pro and Ubuntu Pro FIPS. Another benefit is this kernel live patching, no rebooting for kernels. For the Pro version, we have a 3-week Linux kernel update cycle. Every update cycle, there's multiple CVEs fixed. I used to have a list of CVEs on this slide, but it's just too big to fit on this one. And that gives you, your controlled reboot cycle. You don't have to worry about planning a certain percentage of your cluster going down. It's available instantly. This is a critical feature for massive infrastructure, and even though you may have high availability, you don't want portions of your cluster going down. Or even if you're a smaller shop, you can't afford to have 2 or 3 machines go down for a reboot. That's too much uncertainty. And finally, looking at the support, this is full stack, 24/7 support from Canonical, online ticketing, phone support, full knowledge base access, and just deep understanding of open source and how things work together. Different components, you've heard of Canonical in multiple different open source projects and how we maintain Ubuntu. And this takes it to the next level. These pro security features are, to me, probably the best in class. And the critical compliance for, what we're talking about here, for FIPS, for finance, for healthcare, for government contractors, is available right now, and also through private offers. I'll take it back to you, Luck.
Thank you, Sean. That's really great presentation of our public cloud offering. Just want to mention before we open up to the questions, this offering that Sean just presented is also available on-prem. So if you need any of these features to be available in your data center or your private cloud, we can also provide that. But on the public cloud, as explained by Sean, we can definitely provide Ubuntu Pro and Ubuntu Pro FIPS with or without support through the marketplace. So please contact us if this is what you're after. And now let's open to questions from our audience. If you haven't already, please submit any questions you have in the question text box below the webinar window. Also, to quickly note, I recommend checking the attachments for more information. We have attached a datasheet, some blog posts, and a contact us link in case you have any further questions that are not answered today. Now let's jump into questions. We have a few. The first question I see is about, someone asked which Ubuntu LTS versions are FIPS certified. I think that we touched on that during the presentation. So currently we have FIPS certifications for modules that you can find in Ubuntu 16.04 and Ubuntu 18.04. The certification process takes a little bit, as Vinitha explained. So yeah, we are going to get more Ubuntu versions certified, especially the latest Ubuntu version, the 20.04, will get FIPS certifications in due time, but we are not releasing any dates for that just yet, but this is something that is coming up. I see that the next question actually could be for Vinitha. So someone asked what level of FIPS 140-2 is Ubuntu 18.04 certified for?
Hi, this is Vinitha. Thanks, Lick. Ubuntu 18.04 is certified for level 1 FIPS 140-2, as does our 16.04 also is certified for level 1. The 20.04 that we would do would also be certified for level 1.
Great. Thank you for speaking to that, Vinitha. The next one is someone asked for FIPS, is there a list of published Ubuntu versions / binaries that are approved? Would you take this one, Vinita, as well?
Yes. So we have published a blog for 1804 and 1604 FIPS that would show up in the attachment section soon. That actually lists all the binaries and the versions that are certified on both 1604 and 1804. For 2004, that is upcoming, we've submitted to NIST 5.4 version of kernel, and for OpenSSL, we'll be submitting soon 1.1.1F of version of OpenSSL. And we'll be doing other modules as well, so you would see that come up on the NIST page soon when 2004 gets submitted.
Right, perfect. And thank you, Vinita. And Sean, someone wants to know what's about FIPS for AWS, GovCloud, and regions. Could you speak to that?
Yeah, so available right now in those regions on AWS, classically known as GovCloud, and in the regions with Azure, the government regions, fully available FIPS for 1804, 1604 with optimized kernels.
Great. I think that there are some more questions coming up. I'm just trying to go through them. Go ahead.
I see a question. Can we apply the CIS controls on top of the Ubuntu image, which is launched already? Well, technically you can, but so what all these controls, when you run the hardening scripts, what it does is it goes and changes configuration on a bunch of things. So we do not recommend running these and changing these controls on top on a production system, just so that it shouldn't affect any of the services that are running and that are that are in production. Which is why we recommend having an Ubuntu instance, harden the instance first before you put it to production use. So that's the recommendation that we say. It's nothing stopping you technically from doing that, but it is recommended that you do run it on a vanilla or a freshly installed Ubuntu system before you put it to production use. I also see a question, are the CIS tools available only to Pro? Not really. CIS tools are also made available through our Ubuntu Advantage subscription. We have 3 tiers for Ubuntu Advantage subscriptions. All the customers who use those tiers can make use of CIS, can avail CIS tooling.
Right, that sounds great. Thank you, Vinita. Well, if you have any other questions, please get in touch with our team through the Contact Us link in the attachment section, or visit ubuntu.com/security to get in touch with us. Thank you so much for joining the webinar today. This webinar will also be made available on demand along with the slides. Thanks again for joining, and have a lovely rest of your day.